How does this sound?
Artlist.io.
Welcome to Sustainachella, everyone. All right. Thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate everyone joining. All right. All right. Jenny, can we stop the song?
Music.
Where's... There you go.
It really wants to go and keep going. I know everybody's jamming. So welcome everyone. Today we are pretty packed, so we are going to move forward with it. Yanni is going to be running the show today. So Yanni Pineda is our Senior Sustainability Coordinator with the City of Miami Beach, our fabulous Senior Sustainability Coordinator. So I'll pass to her. She will start warming up the chat and presenting on what we'll be talking about. Thanks, Yanni.
Thanks, Flavia. So before we begin, any of you who have joined us for the first time and are wondering why you can't see yourselves or why you can't speak, it's because we've muted and disabled all the videos for everyone. And the only people whose videos are activated are panelists. And this is, to prevent any kind of funny business from happening. So we'll try our best to have fun today. Another thing to consider is if you really want to ask any questions to the panelists that we have here, there's a Q&A box towards the middle of your Zoom screen. And that should provide you the opportunity to ask questions, and we'll touch base on them towards the end of the workshop. And one more thing to note is that if you want to share comments with everyone within the group, not just our panelists, I recommend choosing all panelists and attendees or everyone. That'll let you share your comments with everyone who's with us today. So let's get started. So before we move on to the next slide, again, thank you guys for being here and joining us for Sustainachella on our Bustling Bees and Powerful Pollinators workshop. Before we get started, I wanted to ask everyone if any of you knew exactly or know where bees happen to sleep when they get tired or at night. Has anyone seen a bee sleep before? And if you haven't seen a bee sleep before, maybe you've seen other types of pollinators there. And if you have pollinators, let me know what kind of pollinators you've seen in your neighborhood, your backyard, anywhere at home. A honeycomb. I'm seeing a lot of answers about honeycombs. Michelle has never seen a bee sleep in public. That's okay. Well, one of the funny things about bees, and I've recently found out about this myself, is that they actually sometimes fall asleep in flowers. So when they get overly exhausted, you end up seeing a lot of them just fall inside the actual flower and they fall asleep. And so you see the bee butts sticking out through the plant. So I thought that was funny, and I figured you guys may enjoy seeing that. What kind of pollinators has everyone seen before outside of bumblebees? Or can anyone name other types of butterflies? I mean, not butterflies, pollinators. So I'm seeing a lot of people putting comments, but you guys are not choosing everyone. You're just sending messages to all panelists. So make sure that you change over your settings to all panelists and attendees. So we have a good amount of people. Flavia, I think we can get started. What do you think? Yeah? All right.
Yeah, let's keep on moving. I just wanted to highlight, Yanni, we have some of our sustainability committee members here. So thanks for joining, guys. We really appreciate it. I see Luis Rodriguez there. Who else from the sustainability committee? We have our promoted chief also. Liz is here.
Oh, our CEO of Hype. Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. All right, guys, thanks for joining. Yeah, let's keep moving, Annie.
Okay, awesome. So we'll start off like always with a couple of ground rules. As I mentioned earlier, all participants are muted and your videos are disabled. If you want to ask any questions, please use the Q&A box. This will make sure that your questions aren't lost within the comments. And please share your comments with the entire group. And you can do that by choosing everyone or all panelists and attendees. For those of you who don't know, we have these workshops every week. Our next one is actually this Friday, and we're going to talk about bird conservation. We're going to have Pelican Harbor Seabird Station join us, and we're also going to have all the amazing ladies from Hawaii join us as well to speak about birds on their side of the world. And I want to thank everybody that's here. We have Sana O'Sullivan with the Miami Beach Botanical Garden. We have Craig Morrell with the Kampong. Shauna K. Walsh, she's with the National Tropical Botanical Garden. We have Makalea here as well, as she's with the County of Maui. We have, well, actually, we were going to have Elisa Jones, but she wasn't able to join us today. And we have Jennifer Westerholm with Nashville, Elaine Christensen with West Palm Beach, and Nikki with Kauai. Do any of you guys want to say hello quickly before we move on?
Aloha, everyone.
Aloha. Awesome.
Aloha, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you here. All right, so let's move on. What was that?
Hi from West Palm Beach.
Oh, hi, Elaine. So we'll move on and start with Sana. Sana is with the Miami Beach Botanical Garden. If you guys haven't been there before, it's an amazing place to escape to. It's a nice little oasis that we have in Miami Beach. So I recommend those of you who haven't visited to check it out. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, Sana, so you can take over.
Thanks. Hi everyone, my name is Sana Sullivan. I'm the head gardener here at Miami Beach Botanical Garden. Thank you so much to the City of Miami Beach's Sustainability Department for having me here to speak about one of my favorite topics, pollinators. So I started volunteering at the garden about 6 years ago, and that's when my love for native plants and wildlife gardening really started to take root. Felt like I was really actively participating in making the environment a better place, and it kind of hooked me. So when I learned to attract butterflies, every new butterfly that would come into our 3-acre urban garden would just delight me. Nowadays, we have over 15 different butterfly species, along with numerous native moths, dragonflies, birds, and about 40,000 honeybees. So I've always felt that this, oh, sorry, one second. Okay, so I've always felt that this quote summed up my sentiments quite well. The key to nature's therapy is feeling like a tiny part of it, not a master over it. The amazing pride you see in seeing a bee land on a plant that you planted, but that's not your act of creation, it's your act of joining in. So I'll speak briefly about the importance of pollinators and then touch on how we can actually join in and attract these pollinators to our gardens. So pollinators are exceptionally important in our lives and on the earth. They're a critical link to the ecosystem because they provide ecological services such as pollination. If you're in an area and you have bees and butterflies all around you, the chances of it being a healthy environment are really high. So they're a great indicator of that as well. And really importantly, I think they inspire a sense of connection to nature, even in cities. So I know when I see a butterfly fly by, my heart does a little flutter. Since 80% of flowering plants need help from a pollinator, this is a really crucial thing that they do. So they take pollen from one part of the flower of a plant to another, which fertilizes it and allows the plant to produce fruit and seeds. And since every goal of every living organism, including plants, is to create offspring for the next generation, this is absolutely essential. We would not survive without them. In everyday life, you know, the food on our table, we know that a portion of it is because of bees, but since these insects are so small and don't really have a voice of their own, there's a lot of threats. The biggest being habitat loss. When cities expand and urban sprawl happens, their habitats are degraded and fragmented, meaning they need to go farther for food. Also, non-native species, diseases, pesticides, pollution, climate change, It's a pretty big deal. So here at the garden, we've had feral hives, whether they're on trees, on limbs over our sidewalks, they've taken over our gazebo. So we have had them relocated into an apiary. We recently was awarded a grant from the city's sustainability department to expand our apiary. So we're really excited. This is our beekeeper, plant man Dan, and this is myself and Sandy Shapiro, the executive director. So honeybees actually aren't native to North America, but they've been here since 1622 and are extremely valuable in their honey producing skills and playing the role of pollinators. We do have native bees that different types of boxes and even dead debris in your garden can be a habitat of. So bees are more efficient pollinators than, say, butterflies because they can hover above the plant and the flower to feed on it and thus pollinating it, rather than butterflies kind of need to land on a flower. But in this case, I'm going to focus on habitats for butterflies because butterfly gardens can host a multitude of different insects. So what can we do? Plant it and they will come. It's true. You'd be really surprised just how quick these little insects will show up when you give them what they need. So they need food, water, shelter, pretty much like us, and we can provide that by building habitats for them. And native plants are really important. Native plants are already adapted to our local climate and soil conditions, so they require less maintenance. So if you plant a variety of them, including host and nectar plants, that's going to be your food and shelter. We've got to go organic. We can't use pesticides or herbicides. And although native plants don't really need fertilizer, if you're going to fertilize, I would urge you to use compost. For those that live on balconies, you can still join in. You can have potted plants. The butterflies and bees will find you. And wildlife gardening is a lot different than gardening just for aesthetics. The plants will get munched, but they do come back, and it's really wonderful when your garden becomes this mini ecosystem. So more on butterflies, they all have specific host plants they need to reproduce. This is the plant that they will lay their eggs on, that the caterpillars will eat, and eventually pupate into chrysalis and become adult butterflies. This is it in real life. This is the zebra longwing, our state butterfly of Florida. It's really fun when you get to know the intricacies of different butterflies and plants. This one, for example, loves to lay their eggs on the tip of the plant. So their host plant is our native passion flower. These butterflies are quite communal. Sometimes I'll walk into the garden and they'll be in like a ball resting from the night before, and I'll spook them, and all of a sudden they'll like a little poof, and there's 50 butterflies flying around you. So that's really quite wonderful. This is an example that one host plant can host multiple butterflies. So the Gulf literary and Julia heliconia both use passion flower to reproduce on. There are exotic passion vines that will work if you're looking for a larger, bigger, colorful flower. One of my favorites is edible passion fruit. It's really kind of nice to feed yourself butterflies. So monarchs are kind of the poster child of butterflies because of their migration, which is threatened by habitat loss and the use of pesticides. I think us as humans really need to create an environment where no insect, plant, or animal is at risk for going extinct. And I think that's why people rally around the monarch. So their migration is that, that resembles a bird species, but imagine being a paper-thin insect weighing less than 1 gram, hopping flower to flower over thousands of miles, using the position of the sun over a bunch of different generations. It's really a source of wonder. Their host plant's milkweed. We have about 20 different native species in Florida. And we should be really careful to not plant tropical milkweed because it is not native, and studies show it negatively affects their health and the ones that are migrating. So the Atala is my favorite butterfly. Its host plant is the kunti, which is Florida's only native cycad. Cycads were among the world's first vascular plants in the Jurassic period. They made up about 20% of the plant species. So if you can imagine them being prolific in South Florida, even when there were mammoths here, it's pretty crazy. They have an interesting history. So historically, the Native Americans had always used them as a food source because the kunti's root can actually be turned into an edible starchy flour. But it wasn't until the early 1900s where settlers started to do this and really industrialize kunti harvesting. It was said during World War I, an estimated 18 tons of kunti were harvested for the military. That, followed by a housing boom on high and dry land, which is their habitat, led to the eventual decline of the Atala. It became rare. People thought it was extirpated, meaning it no longer existed in Florida, and some people thought it meant it went extinct. But in 1979, famed naturalist Roger Hammer rediscovered a small colony, and they've pretty much flourished ever since, especially in butterfly gardens. So this photo was taken at the garden a few days ago. It's in our Pine Rockland demonstration garden, which is another project that was funded by the City of Miami Beach Rising Above grant. This is another example that one plant can host a multitude of different species. So they all these sulfurs like the Bahama senna as their host plant. So going on to nectar plants, nectar is the source of energy and all that good stuff for the little pollinators. Spanish needle, a lot of us I'm sure know in South Florida is quite weedy, but I encourage if you can try to put it in your keep it in your landscape. It's really an important pollinator plant, as is dune sunflower, which is from the beach. It pretty much grows in sand, which shows how resilient native plants are. I think we should know by now that traditional lawns don't supply a lot of habitat to insects. So these ground covers are really good replacements. Note that some of these nectar plants also double as host plants. So it's kind of like a win-win. Sunshine mimosa is really fun because it's a sensitive plant. So when you touch it, it kind of curls in, which can be really nice for kids. All of these shrubs have something in common. They all have very small flowers, but when they flower, it's in prolific numbers, and butterflies and bees just love it. The firebush's tubular flowers can actually attract hummingbirds as well. Trees can also be nectar plants and larval hosts, as you can see. The lignum vitae is a really wonderful, slow-growing, really dense tree. And wild lime, when it flowers, it goes crazy. And also giant swallowtails and a lot of different other swallowtails like it as well. They also like citrus and lime trees that you would find in an edible garden. So the takeaway is really, I think it's up to us to make sure that they survive and thrive. And we can do that by creating micro wildlife habitats that suit the needs of these important insects. So the more plant diversity you have, the more stable your garden will be and the more beneficial insects you can attract. So we're going for not only high plant diversity, but high pollinator diversity. And butterfly gardens are really great at doing that. Some resources to consider here for the native Floridians. Florida Native Plant Society has a lot of great plant lists that you can actually tailor to your specific planting needs, as well as North American Butterfly Association. For those here or in Hawaii, they have good plant and nectar list. If you're home right now and you want to get started, I would suggest maybe buying a few wildflower packet seeds online and sprouting them. And then of course here at the garden, we really look forward to opening soon I'll be offering little butterfly naturalist walkabouts that will end in our nursery, which is fully stocked with native plants. And I'd like to just end on how I see it. They need host plants and we can grow some, so let's steward the earth and all live as one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sana. That was great. I know we were going to leave some questions for the end, but I think these two are tailored to your presentation. So maybe you can give us a quick answer. Luis Rodriguez is asking, which plants do you suggest for balcony? So maybe suggesting one or two that you think would work best or you've seen work best for that area.
So at my house, I have edible passion fruit. So next time you have a passion fruit, sprout one of those seeds and keep it in a pot and use your balcony as a trellis, and it's fabulous. Milkweed will grow on balconies, and there's really a lot, like even the native wildflower seeds, as long as you're there to water them because they are in pots, you'd be surprised how much you can grow. And Luis, next time you're in the garden, I'd be happy to show you a lot of different options.
Thank you. And one more question. Do you guys, once the botanical garden opens up, do you plan to offer school field trips?
Yeah, we always do. So you just call ahead and make an appointment. And we're really happy, either myself or Gaylord, who's our fabulous docent, will tour people around. We ask for like $1 to $2 donation per person, but we're really happy to do it for school groups.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much, Sana. All right, so now we're moving on to Shauna Walsh. She is the conservation biologist with the National Tropical Botanical Garden. Shauna, do you want to share your screen and welcome?
Hello, everyone. Aloha. All right. So thanks for that introduction, Yanni. A bit about my role there. It's primarily to lead in the organization's activities to implement the Hawaii strategy for plant conservation. So doing fieldwork and research to help protect our native Hawaiian plant species. And I grew up on Kauai and Maui. Actually, I was born and raised here in the islands. So I naturally developed a great desire to focus on conserving and protecting our native flora and fauna. So I'm very lucky to have found my dream job at NTBG on Kauai. After high school, I attended Maui Community College for 2 years, and then I transferred to the University of Hawaii at Manoa in Honolulu, and I obtained my bachelor's and master's degrees there in botany. And so in this talk, Conserving the Unknown, Who Pollinates the Rare Hawaiian Flora, I will share a lot of my master's thesis work, which focused on the pollination biology of a very rare and unique Hawaiian endemic species in the Campanulaceae or bellflower family. I also wanted to introduce the NTBG very briefly by sharing our mission, and that is to enrich life through discovery, scientific research, conservation, and education by perpetuating the survival of plants, ecosystems, and cultural knowledge of tropical regions. And the mission statement always really resonated with me before I started working for the organization. And the NTBG as a whole is composed of 5 gardens and 5 nature preserves on 3 of the main Hawaiian islands, Kauai, which is where I am, Maui, and Hawaii or Big Island. And we also have a garden, the Kampong, in Coconut Grove in Florida. Very beautiful little garden. I was there just this past February, actually. Okay, and just to set the stage, Hawaii is a very special place for many reasons. One of them being the unique biodiversity that evolved here over millions of years. With over 1,300 native plant taxa or species, roughly, about 90% are endemic, meaning they're found nowhere else in the world besides Hawaii, out here in the middle of the Pacific. Unfortunately, it's also known as being the endangered species capital of the world. So for example, there are 502 Hawaiian plants and animals listed by the US Fish and Wildlife as threatened or endangered, and 84% of those are plants. So the urgency with which we need to work together to protect our rare plant species is apparent, and the animals depend on the plants. And another interesting thing is that 86% of endemic Hawaiian plants are presumed to be adapted for pollination by animals, about 67% by insects and 19% by birds. And we don't know for sure, but we're making this presumption based on the flower shape and color and scent, and I'll get into that. But just as a few examples, on the upper left, you see a newly described endemic species of moth pollinating 2 different species of Shadea on Oahu. And then to the right of that, here's an example of one of our native forest birds, which you'll hear a lot more about, I believe, this Friday. And that's our amakihi visiting a Trematolobelia kauaiensis on Kauai. And then below, the 2 photos are of our native Hylaeus bees visiting on the left, a native member of the sunflower family, and on the right, Jackmontia. It's a coastal native species. In recent years, a suspected decline in pollinators worldwide has been referred to as a pollination crisis. And in Hawaii, pollinators are in decline due to many factors. And Sana mentioned some of this. One of the biggest reasons is habitat destruction. And this includes destruction by introduced animals such as feral pigs, displacement of native pollinating insects by predatory introduced insects such as this western yellow jacket pictured here, global climate change, which disrupts the natural balance of the plant and pollinators' habitats, including the spread of avian disease carrying mosquitoes to higher elevations that are impacting our native birds. Mosquitoes were introduced to Hawaii in the 1800s, and our native birds had no immunity to these avian diseases. So it really had and continues to have a huge impact on our native bird pollinators. This pollination crisis has prompted increased interest over the years in understanding the roles played by pollinators, and we're seeing how important they are. Many agricultural crops depend on pollinators, natural plant populations, so loss of pollinators really is a matter of public concern. From the plant's perspective, the decline of a pollinator could lead to population declines and ultimately potentially extinction of a plant species. And you guys can answer this in the chat, but how many of you recognize this species or are familiar with it? Brighamia insignis. The Hawaiian names include Alula, Olulu, or Pua'ala. And I'm thinking many of you might be familiar with it because although it's possibly extinct in the wild, it became very popular in the horticulture industry, and you can see it in botanic gardens all over the world. And it is federally listed as endangered, and we assessed it using the IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List. Some of you may also be familiar with that, as critically endangered, possibly extinct in the wild. And it's endemic to Kauai, circled here, and it used to be on Ni'ihau, which is just to the west of Kauai. And the last known plant was seen on the Na Pali coast in Ho'olulu Valley. And my colleague Ken Wood took this photo in 2006, but he last saw it in about 2012, I believe it was, from a helicopter. And we've done some drone work, hiking down the coast and then using drones to survey the cliffs to see if we can still find it. And we actually have a day planned next week, Wednesday, to do more of that work. Hopeful we might find one out there. But human-assisted pollination of Brighamia insignis had been undertaken in the wild to increase seed set, indicating it may be either partially or completely self-incompatible. In other words, unable to pollinate itself in the absence of, or unable to, needing a pollinator to do the job. Some plants can self-pollinate, like form fruit and seeds without a pollinator moving pollen around. And when I first learned about this rare species, I also heard that its presumed pollinator was a moth and that it had gone extinct, and that was one of the reasons for its decline. And when I heard about this, I wanted to know, why was it presumed moth pollinated, since no one had ever seen one visiting it, how it was determined to be self-incompatible, and if anything today might be serving as a pollinator for example, in outplantings. And I realized these things hadn't been studied and thought it would be important and interesting to know the answers to these types of questions from a management perspective. So for instance, we need to ask ourselves whether it's worth the time, money, and effort to do a restoration outplanting if a species is self-incompatible and there are no pollinators. And so for most of our native Hawaiian plants, we still don't have a basic understanding of these things. And so with Brighamia insignis, the flowers up close pictured here, I did a floral biology study to confirm whether it had a moth pollination syndrome. And so a pollination syndrome is a suite of floral traits, including rewards associated with the attraction and utilization of a specific group of animals as pollinators. And we examined things like the size of the flower, nectar standing crop, nectar sugar composition, floral scent, phenology, and just to see whether it had these, conform to these traits of a moth pollinated species. And these are traits that other species that are confirmed moth pollinated typically share. They're white or yellow. They have a strong perfumey scent, usually more in the evening or at night. They have long flowers with nectar. And unlike flowers typically are adapted for bee pollination, they don't have nectar guides. And for Brighamia, the likely adaptation to moth pollination is really exemplified in one way by that drastic difference in the flower morphology and the length compared to the other Hawaiian lobelia genera. And I should mention that is really interesting because all of the genera in this family, Campanulaceae, and I have examples of a species in each genus here, they all arose from a single colonizing ancestor about 13 million years ago. And so they would have evolved these floral traits, like, for example, potentially in Brighamia's case, maybe with a pollinator, whereas the other Hawaiian lobelia genera are adapted for bird pollination with the shorter flowers and they're curved to fit the bills of our native forest birds. And then we looked at the nectar using this analysis called high performance liquid chromatography. And following the nectar sugar sucrose to hexose ratio of these folks in the 80s, did a study and found that if nectar is sucrose rich, that's typically found in species that are pollinated by things like moths, long-tongued bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies. And just to note, we don't have long-tongued bees or hummingbirds in the Hawaiian Islands. And what makes this really interesting, the nectar of Brighamia insignis being sucrose rich, is that others have done research on the nectar of the other Hawaiian lobeliads, again, all from the same ancestor, and their nectar is hexose rich. And that's typical of species that flowers are adapted for bird pollination. So really interesting. And we also looked at the composition of the volatile organic compounds in the scent of the flowers. And we found that in summary, a large proportion of those compounds have been found in other species with flowers that are adapted and pollinated by moths. And in contrast, the other Hawaiian lobeliad species are scentless and they're adapted for bird pollination. So in summary, the nectar and floral scent findings support moth pollination in this species. And then we were really excited to go out and do observations and see if we would see any moths visiting. And we did this with outplantings at our NTBG Limuhuli garden on the North Shore. And as the moth flies, it's about 2 kilometers from the known historic range of the species. So there were no populations to do this kind of study with in the wild, but it's pretty close. And these were all the visitors that I saw doing over 30 hours of observations during the day and at night. Didn't see any moths, unfortunately, and all of the visitors were non-native. And so in summary, no moths and only occasional non-native insect species visited Brighamia insignis flowers. And then getting at that question whether it could self-pollinate or not, we did a breeding system study. And to do this, we carried out a series of manipulative pollination experiments, such as self-pollination or outcross pollination. And we were curious whether we would find differences in things like fruit and seed set between the different treatments. And again, from a conservation management perspective, if a species is self-incompatible and there are no pollinators, we really need to decide whether we can assume an outplanting will be regenerating in the wild. And so skipping over the results in any kind of detail, just to summarize, the species was found to be pollinator dependent, self-incompatible. And in conclusion of those different studies, unless all threats are managed in situ, so in the wild, and specialized pollinators are sufficiently abundant to outcross this species in natural settings, the fate of Brighamia insignis may forever remain in the hands of ex situ conservationists. In other words, in places like botanic gardens. And we're going to continue doing that for now. And just to note, if you're interested in learning or reading more about that work, it's available for free online, open access. And mahalo for joining in. It was a pleasure to participate in this. And I know we'll go over questions maybe in the end, but in case we don't get to all of them and you have some, feel free to email me anytime. Mahalo.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was great.
You're welcome.
And so we'll move on over to Craig Morrell now, and he is with the Kampong, which is also part of the National Tropical Botanical Garden. I'm not sure how many of you have gone there, but it's absolutely beautiful, and I really recommend that once everything gets back to normal and it opens up again, that you give it a visit, because it's absolutely amazing. I know I always take my family there. Craig, do you have your presentation ready so you can share your screen?
Working on it now. Let's see if it works. Yay!
You got it? Awesome.
Okay, let's see if we can get this going. Slideshow.
And while you open, Craig, I think we have a question here for Shauna, and can be Shauna and can be whoever wants to answer. What differentiates butterflies from moths?
That's a good question.
Was that for, oh, Sana or Shauna?
Yeah.
Either of us? There's something about, that is a great question, and I've looked it up, but I can't recall at the moment. But I wonder if it's something about the hairs on the moths and not on the butterflies. There's something else about the different parts of the body. Anyway, I'll get back to you.
I think
Were you able to get the presentation?
we're just about ready to go.
Okay, because I have one more question here. I was just asked, I guess whoever wants to answer this can answer this. Who is or what kind of pollinator is your favorite type of pollinator, and why? So maybe Sana and Shauna want to answer that.
I mean, I said mine, it's the Atala, just because they're so beautiful. And we actually got caterpillars from Montgomery Botanical Garden and brought them here. And that was like within the same couple months that the convention center planted thousands of their host plant. So their population just went crazy. And that made me really happy.
Well, one of my favorite pollinators may not exist anymore. It might be extinct and I've never seen it, but it's the fabulous green sphinx moth of Kauai. And it hasn't been seen in like 20 years, but it's endemic. It's an endemic genus to Kauai. And I wonder if that could have been the pollinator for Brighamia, actually. And I just looked up butterflies and moths, and I forgot about this. The butterflies, typically, they have long, thin antennae, while moths have the shorter, feathery antennas. I remember that now after reading it. So that's one thing, and there are some others.
Great, thanks for clarifying it. Now I need to find a picture of that green sphinx moth. Is that what you said it was called? It's interesting.
The fabulous green sphinx moth of Kauai, Tinostoma smaragdidus.
Quite a name too.
I'll write it. I'll type it in the chat.
Thanks. Craig, how are you doing? Do you want me to share my screen? We're good?
I've got it on my screen. Have you got
All
it
right.
on yours?
Go ahead and share it.
Okay.
Yeah, Craig, you might have to go to the share screen, the green button underneath, and then share the PowerPoint. Sometimes if you have a lot of things open, you'll have to scroll down around everything you have.
Nope,
And if you have, it's not opening.
I have it. How about there? Is that it?
No. And Yanni can share the screen and open the presentation, and then you just have to be telling her the next slide.
Yeah,
But we'll take
just
over.
offline.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, it gets, between PowerPoint and Zoom, they don't communicate very well. So
Do you see it now?
Sure.
yeah, we can see it.
Great. So you can go ahead, Craig.
Okay, cancel that. Are we up?
Yep.
Okay, let's see if I can. And you have it in full screen for yourself?
Yes.
Very good. Hi, I'm Craig Morrell. I'm the director of the Kampong of the National Tropical Botanical Garden in Coconut Grove. We are one of the 5 gardens in the family of NTBG. Shauna was just reporting from Hawaii, and I'm reporting from Miami. And I did want to introduce everyone to a botanical garden that not so many people have visited. We're not as famous as other gardens. We are Dr. Fairchild's private home garden from about a century ago. And he introduced thousands of varieties of food plants. Most of what we have here is not native, yet we still have a really robust pollinator population here. About 500,000 bees in 30 hives, and we'll see that in just a minute. But my job is to maintain this 100-year-old property. It's 8 acres on Biscayne Bay, just off Douglas Road. And bees play a huge role in what we're doing here. We have a lot of very old mango and avocado trees. Some of them are over 100 years old. But we have a lot of recent introductions too. And bees have found a way to harvest pollen from everything. One of the things that we were really grateful for is our mango collections really wouldn't fruit very well unless we had bees. So about 3 years ago, we worked with a beekeeper who brought in about 30 hives, and they are extremely robust. Right now, they are moving at top speed, and you see the bees absolutely everywhere, from water lilies and aquatic plants to our cactus, to our mangroves, mangoes, avocados, garcinias, and so on. So I wanted to give people a quick introduction to what the Kampong is. And the Kampong has been here for well over 100 years. It's been in cultivation since about 1870. And we've had plants on the property for a very long time. Interestingly, bees, hummingbirds, and other pollinators have found a really nice home here. We're away from construction, we're away from traffic. We have a very interesting group of plants here, of which bees have found a way to harvest everything. So we wanted to make sure that everybody understood that we are actually Dr. Fairchild's home and not Fairchild Garden down the street, which is much larger. He lived here for about 25 years before Fairchild Garden was put into place. And it contains a lot of his original collections of mangoes and avocados and other fruit trees that he brought in from his collections all over the world. He is credited with bringing in about 60,000 introductions of food plants, but they didn't all end up here. He brought in things like soybeans and figs, dates, palm tree seeds, rice, sorghum, kale, and so on. But here, this was his home garden, so we take care of some heritage plants and the bees help us out. So we cultivate our bees in regular hive boxes. They're completely segregated from anything else like traffic or construction, and they seem to be having a pretty good time of it. I tried to get a video of our bees that were just flooding out of the bee boxes this afternoon in the sunshine, but we have a really robust bee colony, and they have, at least here, we're about 1/4 of a mile long. and they traverse that distance without any trouble whatsoever. We want bees to pollinate just about everything because everything relies on them. But the main thing is we want to have seeds and fruit that we can distribute to everybody else. In this photo, just about everything in the photo is bee pollinated. Whether it's the coconuts, mangroves, some of the turf grasses, some of our native species, native palms, and so on. This is our peninsula that goes out into the ocean. One of the most important food crops on Earth are coconuts, very heavily bee pollinated, and we get a really good set of coconuts. We have a dozen varieties of coconuts here, some of which are resistant to diseases. So we're really happy our bees are doing what they're doing. Fairchild introduced a lot of food crops, but the ones that people really like the most are mangoes and avocados. And this picture shows a really good set on avocados. The bees go right for it and they go right back to the hives. And one of the most interesting things is that one of the studies of the pollen in those hives that was collected by bees on our property showed over 400 species of pollen inside the beehives. Drove the technicians quite crazy. In some cases, we have plants that are really hard to pollinate without plenty of bees, multiple pollination attempts. And in this particular picture, it's Napoleonia, which is a really unusual genus that you don't see very often. It's in the same family as Brazil nut, and it only sets seed if we have a really good population of bees nearby. So it's our favorite pollinator. We have over 1,000 species of plants here. And I like to joke with people that our bees are illiterate. They'll go for anything that has good pollen in it. So whether it's mangroves, avocados, water plants, in some cases we have very unusual water plants from Asia. They find it, they feed on it, and they're robust because of it. We also have a nice selection of mangroves, all 3 native species. And the bees do a great job of pollinating all 3 of those species. Mangroves are critical to holding our coastline together. They're also really important about holding our channel coast together. So we have red, white, and black mangroves here, and bees go for all 3 of them. We get really good seed set on all 3 species, but this is probably the most iconic one. This is the red mangrove, and it has plenty of seeds. So environmental regulations management people look at our mangroves and say that they're in really good health, and bees play a really important role in that. Our Kampong is a fantastic garden. We highly recommend you visit it when you get a chance, when the rules are allowable for that. We welcome visitors, and we look forward to showing off what Dr. Fairchild has for you. Take care.
Sorry, I just realized I was muted. Thanks so much, Craig. I love these pictures. And it's funny because you were able to actually control the presentation off of my screen, and I have no idea how you did that, but I was thoroughly impressed. So it somehow worked out. All right, so now we're going to move on to our amazing partners. We have Elaine Christian here with us from West Palm Beach, and she's going to talk about all the programs that they have north of us. So Elaine, let me go back. Elaine, go for it.
Hi everyone.
Am I sharing my screen, by the way, or do you guys still see it?
Not yet.
Okay, let me try one more time. Sorry. All right.
Perfect. Thank you. So hi everyone. I'm with the City of West Palm Beach. I'm a sustainability program coordinator there, and just wanted to talk a little bit about what we have going on. We have an integrated pest management policy. So that's for internal city properties. So we reduce pesticide use on city property. We start with the least toxic first to control, and we specifically call out the neonicotinoids specifically so that, those are harmful to our pollinators. So we call those out not to use on city property. Also, we have a landscape policy. We promote the use of natives and target the removal of our invasive species or invasive exotics. And we also have a landscape ordinance, which applies citywide, which has been expanded recently. So a minimum of 60% of plant material added should be Florida native or drought tolerant species. And again, that's to help our pollinators and natives here. We also hand out wildflower packets, seed packets. So there's a little picture there. And last summer, I did some programs with our summer camp kids, and we made seed bombs with native seed flowers, so with native seeds. And so that's a fun activity that you guys can do at home if you have kids, or just for adults too. I had a lot of fun doing it.
Great, thanks. I actually had one question. Can you describe again what the little balls in the picture are?
Oh, well, you can call them seed bombs, or if you don't feel comfortable with bomb, you can call them seed balls, either one. But it's basically, you can Google them. It's a really simple activity. It's just some clay, seeds, and dirt, really, just all kind of rolled up there.
That's awesome. That's a really great idea. Thanks, Elaine. All right, we're gonna move on to Jennifer Westerholm, and she is with Nashville.
Hi, everybody. So thanks for having me. I work in our sustainability division in Nashville, Tennessee, so moving a little bit further north even. And we are kind of an interesting city in that our city and county government is merged. So we're a metropolitan government. So our city is actually quite large in size in that it encompasses the entire county. So we have a lot of areas within our city that are more rural in character. We have about 13,000 acres of green space within our city, over 100 miles of greenways, and 180 city parks just within the city of Nashville. So we have a lot of green space, and we're actively working to make sure that that's cultivated so that it's a good place for pollinators. So we have a Root Nashville initiative to plant 500,000 new trees by 2050, and a number of nonprofits that are working to plant rain gardens and pollinator gardens, both in residential and city properties. So that's pretty exciting. We have, even within the more urban parts of our city, a lot of green roofs popping up, both at our nature centers, on city facilities, but also within the private sector. But I want to focus on one roof in particular, which is that picture down there in the bottom left, that very large green roof, which is our convention center. It's called Music City Center, and it's a 4-acre green roof. It's the largest green roof in the Southeast. It's huge and planted with sedum and lots of plants that are kind of roof tolerant. But as you can see, it's right in the center of our city. So it's very much in an urban area. And there's 4 beehives that are tended to that live on top of the Music City Center green roof. They produced over 90 pounds of honey last year, and that honey is used in the kitchen at the Music City Center facility that has all sorts of conventions and things like that. So they use that honey locally. And there's other downtown buildings as well that have green roofs, but that's a really cool example of something we have right in our downtown core. The little graph that you see there on the slide with the orange and brown wedges, they did a honey analysis of the honey that was produced by the bees on the Music City Center roof, and each one of those little wedges represents a different flower or tree or plant that whose like DNA ended up in the honey. So it's really cool to see the diversity of plants that even these very urban bees are visiting to produce the honey. So yes, Nashville is definitely wants to befriend pollinators and be a welcoming place for our pollinators. And thanks for having us today.
Thanks, Jennifer. I want to take that graphic from you at some point just so I can look at it.
Yeah.
Really, I didn't know that they captured that much information. That's an amazing program. So I know that we're running very short on time, so I'm going to ask 2 questions that I have here in the Q&A. Both of them look to be for Craig. So Laura wants to know if the Kampong encourages native bees on site.
I don't know. My understanding is that most of our bees are European. They're cultivated by a professional beekeeper. My understanding is that they're European. I don't know if we cultivate native bees, but my understanding is that we have about half a dozen species here. and they're pretty robust. We agree with the idea that insecticide use should be limited. For the most part, the only thing I use as an insecticide is just sulfur, which doesn't bother them a bit.
Great, thank you. And if anybody else, if anybody has questions, everyone's emails are on the Sustainachella webpage. So if there's anything you think of after this workshop, feel free to send the questions over to the panelists. And Craig, one more question. It's just a quick one. They're wondering if the Kampong will be opening next week for visitors.
No. We're looking at a soft opening the first week of June for members, second week of June for Coconut Grove residents, possibly third week of June for general public, but we will not be open next week at all.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, okay, so we are now going to move on to quiz time. So I'm hoping everybody was paying attention. So we're going to play Kahoot. For those who haven't played before, you're going to definitely need your phones. Let me pull up the screen for us. Give me 1 second.
Get on it, guys. Get prepared for the most waited time, the Kahoot. Time you've been looking for.
Great.
There
So I mentioned for those of you who haven't played, you have to go to the website that I have listed here, kahoot.it, and then you put in the game pin on your phone, and then you put in your nickname. So I'll give everybody a minute to join. And I'll put some music on. I know there's more of you than that, so I hope everyone joins. Okay, let's get started. We have a big number of people on. Why do animals pollinate? Everyone. All of the other answers I think were pretty good too. All right, so bustling bees is at the top, then we have Rose and Peter Pan. All right, next question. Which animal is not a pollinator? This should be easy. Too. I'm really impressed today. Bustling bees is still at the top, Rose and Peter Pan. All right. Next question. What is a threat to pollinators? People probably answered too fast, but a good number of you got it right. All right, next question, which is the last one. Uh-oh, Rose went to the top and bustling bees went to second place, sorry. All right, next question. Which flower helps pollinators? This is everyone got that one right. All right, so let's see who won. It's the top 3 scorers are going to get a prize. Just make sure you email me after this. I have a feeling she's not alone. Les, as always. Thanks so much, guys.
And there is no losers, Sarah. Come on. It's just really hard to compete with the Kahoot pros, you know? Like, give us some guidelines about how he does it. He's always top 5. It's like, I can't, yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna pull up the screen again so we can finish up the presentation.
All right, and guys, I see that there is no more questions in the Q&A. So we are going to start wrapping up right now, unless you have a burning question, throw it in there right now before we end. And if not, feel free to be sending us the questions that you have afterwards. We can always connect you with the panelists. We definitely want to thank everyone for joining us and doing such an amazing job today. Thanks Jennifer, Craig, Sana, Shana, Elaine, Nikki, Makalea. Am I missing anyone from the panelists? I guess I mentioned everyone. Thanks so much, Yanni, Michelle, for all your hard work, and also Amanda, that is doing all the Facebook Live for us right now, and being super patient with us as we go through the Sustainachella process. Thanks so much, Amanda. We really appreciate all your help. All right, guys, so finishing up with love and gratitude, as always. Thank you so much for joining us today. Send you guys lots of love and gratitude for being here with us today. And I don't know if any of the folks here, the panelists, if you guys want to say anything to the folks here in the call, don't be shy. It's Sustainachella, everybody gets to talk.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for having an interest in things that pollinate what we eat.
Awesome. I'm so looking forward to going to the compound, Craig, after your presentation. And I live in the Grove, so.
Come on.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
All right, guys. Aloha. Thanks so much, our friends in Hawaii, Nashville, West Palm Beach. Yes, everywhere. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.